Welcome to the podcast, everyone. My name is Daniel, as in Ghost Guide. For this week, we have stories of a haunted little historic town. It also happens to be considered Canada's UFO capital. By the way, personally, this is in my own backyard. I have a connection to this town. I love this place. It is quite beautiful. It's named Dundas. I got some personal experiences for you from the Hermitage Ruins, also in my backyard. And I got another Dan for you. There's a Canadian actor named Dan Aykroyd. Have you heard of him? Now, he has a connection to ghosts that everybody knows about through the movie Ghostbusters. But did you know that his family is actually one of the oldest spiritualist families in all of Canada? I'm going to talk a little bit about that as part of the Strange News segment. I got a new format alert for you. All my personal thoughts and updates, which probably nobody gives a lick about, they're going to be moved to the end of the podcast. So the podcast itself as well is going to be in a shorter format. This is to stop me from droning on and on and on, which I think happened unfortunately last week. So I'm going to try and, clip all the stuff that isn't needed and keep it nice and tight and short and get right to the point for you. Just forget that part there, but everything else is going to be nice and tight. Now, I had some posts on the Ghost Guy Daniel Facebook page. I'm actually quite excited about this. I don't get a lot of people on there, so when people come in and they make comments, I'm very happy. This time is posting about the Hermitage Ruins. Now, if you haven't listened in the past, Hermitage Ruins is one of the locations that I personally lead tours at. It's been in the Ghost Walks family since like 2004, and it is an extremely haunted location in where I'm from, Hamilton and the surrounding regions. This town is called Ancaster, where it's located. So whenever I post anything, because I'm located here and as well, it is extremely haunted. It has been for generations, that people will post underneath, and I always get amazing stories. So even on my Ghost Guy Daniel Facebook page, which really has next to no reach other than my own close personal contacts, I was very excited to see this. So I posted Hermitage related. It was the ghost photo, so it's on there if anybody wants to look. Just Ghost Guy Daniel on Facebook. And I had two experiences passed along to me from two people who posted underneath. I got Brenda and Greg. So Brenda mentioned that her and her daughter and a friend were in the low brush to the right of the building about 20 years ago. So you're talking about the beginning of the 2000s, and if you look to the front of the building, which is actually where the ghost photo showed up, is to the right. Now, there used to be brush. It's since been renovated. It's now opened up. But back then you had maybe, say 6 feet, 6 foot path that took you around the side of the ruins. And you couldn't go through the ruins. You had to go around the side because the fronts were all gated off. They didn't want anybody inside in case it fell on top of them, which wouldn't have been good. So her daughter, and a friend were in that area to the right of the building about 20 years ago, digging in the dirt. They were looking for broken pieces of pottery and such. The area is very historic. They were distracted. Oh, okay. So the pottery was discarded after the fire that happened. We're talking about when the place became ruins back in the early 1900s. So they're looking for that pottery that belonged to the Leith family who built the house. It was on their third trip there that we heard a woman mumbling and quietly sobbing in low tones just behind us. It was a sunny, warm day, yet the chills went straight to my bones to hear that and not see a person, anyone around us. We never went back after that. No doubt. Now, that was one of the things I did mention before, is that the hearing of voices in the woods when you're on that area off to the right there where the shadow was captured. So that seems to be a very active spot. Not so much just shadows, but hearing voices, seeing lights. So Brenda, just to say to you that yes, that is not a crazy experience to have. and that other people have also had it. And I also want to mention that you don't, like, people always mention in horror stories and whatnot, after they had the experience, like, oh, and he never went back again, or he quit the next day. I want to say to all people, if you have this type of experience, don't be overly freaked out. Yes, it is freaky in the sense that you're probably hearing the voices of people who are long dead and in the ground. Try not to creep anyone out, although I should. That's what the podcast is about. But, push that aside and just note that it is just energy. And in most cases, it's just leftover energy. So when people say they don't ever go back, I do go back. And even if you have the experience again, just try and normalize it. It's probably not good for somebody who leads ghost tours as a living to say that you shouldn't be scared of ghosts, but really in the end you shouldn't be. It is, in my mind, it is a big part of the human experience to have that connection, that energy connection to the past, and having that personal experience of hearing that woman talking, which could very well have been Alma Leith, who was the last owner of the house and who died inside the structure. She lived in a small little wooden shack in there. It could be very well have been her that you were hearing, but you shouldn't be freaked out by that. I'll give you a very quick story here before moving on. This is somebody close to me. Their daughter had, woke up in the middle of the night and seemed to be interacting. It was before the kid could talk or speak like in straight sentences. Seemed to be interacting with something that was in the corner of the room. Of course, there was nothing in the corner of the room, and it would have been awesome if the kid was a little bit older and could tell you what she was seeing, but it was almost like she was talking to a person. And for most people, that freaks them out, and I completely understand, especially when it's in your home at nighttime. I believe it was in a basement as well. So with all those factors, I can see why it'd be freaky. But for me personally, I would have wanted more information. I would have been curious to know, because children have that extra sense that we've lost. I believe they can see and definitely feel those energies, and I'm sure anybody who's had that experience and kids like that in their life are nodding their heads right now in agreement. Anybody who doesn't believe in ghosts, well, first off, why are you listening to me right now? And second, just note it's true. So the second experience that was posted on the Facebook page came from a fellow named Greg. And Greg says, when the structure was taken down, so this is when it was renovated. So I remember at that one point there was the danger of it falling down. So at one point they got the money, Save the Hermitage campaign with an activist named Leanne Pluthero. They got the money, the political support. They took the damaged structure down and rebuilt it from scratch. So when the structure was taken down for rebuilding, the bricks were marked and the area was fenced off. We went for a family hike, this is Greg, on a Sunday. No one around, and then the sounds of the bricks being stacked and the voices like people were working occurred. And then there was a growl in my wife's ear at the back of the property, which was terrifying, no doubt. It was crazy, but the growl at the back of the property was scary. The growl was in my left ear and my wife's right ear. Okay, that's interesting. Like the person was standing between us. Exactly. So that's actually a good element there. Again, trying not to get into too many tangents, but as a former investigator, if you have these experiences, it's always good to mention these physical elements, because the experience is definitely on an energy level. But if you have a physical element such as that, where, okay, yes, they both heard a growl, and then they could say, oh, it was almost like it was echoing in the wind, and I heard it, in the wind or whatever, then you're kind of like, okay, that doesn't make sense to me. It doesn't sound believable. But here, this one's different. This says, the growl was in my left ear and my wife's right. They're standing, and they got that space in between them. It was almost like there's a physical element that this is where the experience was located, that whatever energy was occurring was in this space. That's the same thing that happens when you have an EMF detector, right? And you're going around trying to sense for ghosts, and the thing will spike. Well, say you step back And most people, when it spikes, they're all excited and they stand there and they're like, "Who is it? What do you want? Please don't kill me." And they don't, they're not in the sense, okay, let's get an investigator's point of view. Okay, I just walked into this element here that's spiking. First thing you do is you look around, you look for anything electrical, any water pipes that can cause it to go off naturally. And then the second thing is, okay, let's test the space. And what you could do is, if you have other team members, they then take the pictures, they then try and record the EVPs. But what you could as well, if you're by yourself, is step back. So you step back, see if the EMF detector goes back to 0, and then step forward again so that you've then confined the space. Now, of course, the energy could move, but hopefully it's not. Hopefully it wants that interaction, and you can step back, step forward, see if the spike happens again, and then maybe throw the EMF detector on the ground and get your camera out. You really shouldn't be investigating alone, especially in active places. You want to have that, at least the one other person who can document. So you got detection and then document, which is photographs, video, sound recording, or all three. You just a video with sound and see what comes through, although sound recording itself can get closer than video with sound. So if you have both, you're going to have a camera in one hand and a recorder in the other, but I digress. So 2 wonderful experiences from the Hermitage Ruins on my not active at all Ghost Guy Daniel Facebook page. I know it will grow in the future, but for now it's not active at all. So Brenda, Greg, thank you for coming on that page and sharing your experiences. It was wonderful to be able to hear and read them. Now, the main subject of today's podcast is the open talk. And I decided, I think right now, because the podcast isn't really well known, it hasn't spread out. I do have some wonderful listeners in the United States, and thank you for joining me. I think the majority, though, are in my own region, because that's where the company that I work for, the Ghost Walks, that's their reach. This will change in the future. So for now, I'm gonna have some local content, but that will change as we move forward. So when I talk about this small town that's located in my own backyard, it's Dundas, Ontario, Canada. Now, technically, it is part of the city of Hamilton, where I'm from. And personally, I love this town. It's extremely historic. And at the beginning, the town itself almost became the city. So it was just this weird competition thing that was happening back in the day. So Dundas was the well-known town for this region. And to be honest, Hamilton didn't even exist. Hamilton was known as Barton Township up until about the 1840s. And Dundas and Barton date back to the 1700s. They were loyalist towns. Loyalists coming up from the United States during the American Revolution to claim their free land. Now, Dundas was so well known that the street Dundas, the one that goes through Toronto, is named after the town. So you can see that they had high hopes for it. They had the Desjardins Canal that went into Cootes Paradise. It was all part of a strategic plan. And one of the main things two things that stopped Dundas from becoming the main city over Hamilton was that the canal itself was too thin for modern boats to get through. And they couldn't change the geography, so that stopped that. And then the second thing was the railway. Now, I don't know if they interacted with each other, if the boat and the railway, because of that canal, caused both to avoid Dundas. But Hamilton ended up going after the railway, part of the efforts of a fellow named Sir Allan MacNab. He was the owner of what is now a museum known as Dundas Castle. You can look him up. But part of his efforts to bring the railway to to Hamilton. So this Hamilton exploded, Dundas did not. So as it stands now, Dundas is more of a nice, quaint, historic town, beautiful place, wonderful place to live. Their downtown area is amazing. Now, speaking of the geography, though, this is what gets into my first point about Dundas. And that is that we believe it to be Canada's UFO capital. this is a ghost podcast. I am more of a ghost person. To be honest, I'm not really that into aliens. I know a lot of paranormal folk out there do love the idea of aliens. I'm not one of you. I'm sorry to say that. I don't know about aliens. I'm sure there's planets out there with habitable life. I don't put too much onus on it. I mean, the galaxy is unending from our point of view, so who knows? Maybe we'll be visited. Maybe we've already been visited. If you do believe we've already been visited, then you should move to Dundas, especially if you love this stuff. But I think it's the most noted UFO sightings have happened in this small town that's now part of Hamilton. I could say why geographically, as I was getting into, is their downtown and main area is located inside of a valley. And I always wondered this. I don't know the scientific aspect, but if with a valley and you're surrounded by forest and darkness, it's possible that light pollution is at a much lower rate. So that if you're in the valley, I've never personally tested this. Now that I'm saying it, I'm gonna go test it eventually. But can you see the stars better from the downtown area valley of Dundas? I wonder. If anybody from Dundas, please let me know. Ghost Guide Daniel on Facebook and GG Daniel at ghostwalks.com. So can you see the night sky better than if you were in a city with tons of light pollution, especially if you're into the neighborhoods? Dundas neighborhoods are very dark. There's not a lot of street light. It's very very calm that way. So maybe that's one of the reasons why, even if a UFO was flying over Hamilton right over my head as I speak right now, maybe I wouldn't see it because of all of the city's light pollution. That could be a part of it. I don't know if there's any other cities that have a similar setup that are close to a major population like that. I don't know if UFOs, if the aliens want to be close to major populations. If I were them, I'd be flying over countryside, which I'm sure they do that too. Whatever their reasoning is, maybe they need a lot of people to anally probe. I don't know, but I'm getting off topic again. Many experiences, and I just happen to have two of them right now for you. Now, these are not modern, as with everything on the show. The one is from 2010, the other one is from 2009. So they're very detailed about this. They say the date of sighting is October 2nd, 2010. And the time of sighting was 4 p.m. local time. Okay, actually that throws away the whole idea of light pollution, because this one was during the day. So the description is, this is actually a very scientific looking site. I love it. UFOs Northwest. I don't even know if the site's still up. So the description says, on that date, this is from a first person point of view, I was driving down from Campbellville at 4 p.m. on Bronte Road. And when I reached Dundas, I was looking up into the blue sky. The sun was not shining because it was in the west, and this was the east side of Bronte Road. And there was this silver object or round disc. It moved pretty fast and then suddenly disappeared. Sorry, I should have reread this at the beginning. Okay, there were no clouds, is what he's trying to say. No is K-N-O-W. Whoops. That doesn't take away from the legitimacy of this experience, okay? Mark my words. So a disc was in the sky and it suddenly disappeared. There were no clouds. So I thought, well, there you are. This is what you see on the UFO show when the objects disappear. So they're saying it was a stereotypical UFO sighting. Now, it doesn't give a lot of detail, which is unfortunate. My guess is that there probably was in the distance. I don't think it was just hovering right over the road. So my guess is it's probably in the distance. And if it's daytime, as opposed to night, you can see a shining object. But in daytime, like this is actually good to see. It's silver object because you would be able to see the color. So I believe this in the sense that he mentions a lot of detail with the sun not being in his eyes, and he mentioned the color, saying that it was a silver object and moving fast, and that it suddenly disappeared. The reason I might not believe it is because he spelled no incorrectly. K-N-O-W. Well, no, it was spelled correctly. It's just used in the wrong context. And that he mentioned UFO shows. That kind of throws me off because he would be right into this, right, if he watches the shows. So some stuff to believe, some stuff maybe not. So the second one, September 10th, 2009, happened at, this is an early one. It happened at 5:30 a.m. Number of witnesses, 1. Number of objects, 1. This is off of a site called ufoinfo.com. I'm not sure that exists either. These are saved documents, just so you know. Shape of the object was rectangle. That's different. That's more like Star Wars ships. Can your sighting be a UFO balloon or lantern? And he said no. Weather conditions. This is very detailed. It said thick cloud overhead, totally clear in a complete 360 view from the ground to the cloud cover. All right. So the experience is, I was driving home from work at approximately 5:30 a.m., traveling west along the 403 highway, leaving Burlington and heading to my home on the Dundas Escarpment. Yeah, this goes against what I said before as well. Just I have a good theory. So this is on the escarpment, not in the valley. The light was extremely brilliant and white in color. It remained motionless for approximately 15 seconds, that's a lot, and then slowly pulled behind the clouds. A few seconds later, it punched through the clouds again, only this time farther away, and this time at the 10 o'clock position. Again, it remained for about 15 to 20 seconds, and pulling out of sight. There was no visible sight of a vessel or metallic showing, just the brilliant white light approximately 1 mile across and roughly 500 feet high. That is big. Okay, I'll come back to that. This happened, I would say, 8 to 12 times. That's a lot. Before disappearing from sight somewhere over West Flamborough. That's adjoining town. I tried to make it home in time to get my camera and take some shots. Unfortunately, it was gone before I could get any pictures. To this day, I don't know exactly what I was witnessing. I do know it was a unique sight. I carried my camera to work every day for 2 months, but I have never seen this light again. Do I think this was a UFO? I don't know. I do know this is one of the most fascinating mornings I can remember. I hope I'm better prepared next time. So, I mean, the way the guy writes his experience, I assume if it's him writing or if it's UFO Info doing this for him, that there is a legitimacy to it. That, first off, he's giving the actual positions using a clock system, 12 o'clock, 10 o'clock. So it's very detailed in that sense that he's giving the actual positions of this object. But where he lost me, and I kind of paused there for a second, is that first off, it was a brilliant white light. It didn't really see an object itself, but they said it was 1 mile across and 500 feet high. That one kind of gets me, because if he is seeing it, there's got to be at least 1 or 2 other people who are seeing it as well. Something that massive would show up. And especially for that long period of time. So he said 10 to 15, so it's 15 to 20 seconds each time, and then 8 to 12 times. That's however long that is. Somebody do the math. However many minutes that was, when most experiences with the UFO are very quick. So to say it lasted for that long, I mean, he couldn't have been the only person that was watching it. If he's not the only person, I'm sure one other person out there had a camera. With 2009, you had cell phone cameras back then. So I think it might have been, what was it, flip phone? Flip phone, but there was still cameras on that. You could have taken a poorly pixelated photo of it, at least caught something. I don't know. So this one for me is a little on the fence. Yes, the description, the way he was talking is good, but then I question, ufoinfo.com. If any of the representatives for that website are listening right now, maybe you can let me know if there was any editing done to this 12-year-old, almost 12-year-old report. But still, interesting. Very interesting, very detailed. And I don't know, after doing research for this podcast, I'm very interested now in the idea of aliens. I was reading some other experiences as well, and I was thinking, there's I can see why people who are into the paranormal are also into aliens and UFOs, because it all kind of surrounds the idea of the unknown. So the idea of ghosts existing, and that dead people could very well be walking among us right now in certain ways and trying to communicate with us. That has an interesting aspect to it. But then also the idea that, aliens exist and that beyond our solar system, or even within, we just haven't detected it. That was probably beyond our solar system, that there are other habited planets, and that they've been around longer, or that certain aspects of their society has caused them to evolve quicker than us, and they have the technology to now leave their galaxy and come visit us. I mean, I can feel the fascination of that, and then maybe in the future we'll be able to visit those planets. Imagine that. Imagine, instead of just flying from Canada to the United States, that you fly to another planet. That way you're getting off of the spaceship. The feeling that you would have being on another place, surrounded by what is essentially aliens. Who knows on their planet what species? Like on our planet, sorry for those who don't believe in this, but in our planet, it was primates that evolved into conscious beings. But maybe on their planet it was something else, like raccoons. That's the planet I want to visit. I know everybody's thinking of Guardians of the Galaxy. He's probably one of my favorite characters. But I'd visit the planet where the raccoon evolved. They're so cute. They're little bandits. They got their bandit mask on. They steal your garbage. So anyway, I know a lot of people are right now thinking, okay, Daniel, this is a ghost show. Well, I got you covered. Dundas is also a very haunted place. Not just about the UFOs there. But before we do that, let's take a quick 20-second break here. Again, this is a time for you to detect what's around you. I'm not too much ghost talk right now, but who knows? If you're in a haunted location, it's a perfect opportunity. We are talking ghosts. So go ahead and see if there's anything around you. Anything? Do you see any UFOs? So I mentioned that Dundas is not just about the aliens, it's also about the ghosts. I mean, you have a very historic town with an interesting past. I'm not even talking about in the sense that it's just historic, so there's ghosts. I'm talking about that, like Hamilton, it is got a strange history to it, that Dundas was almost like a rebel town compared to the other cities and towns in Canada. So they have a lot of historic buildings. Now, the one that kind of interests me the most, I was deciding what I was going to cover on the podcast here, but there's a school. Now, it's not in the main downtown core. You have to drive up the street a bit. It's now been converted to lofts. It's right before you go up the hill to the escarpment there. But this school was called Dundas District, and today it's lofts. But back then it was a school. Not that long ago. I'm talking maybe 5 years ago, 10 years ago, it was a school. But for this story, we're going to go back to the 1950s. The 1950s, inside the school, there were 5 caretakers. Now, the caretakers all had different stations around the school. They would, do anything from handiwork to cleaning to whatever. They just took care of the building, made sure that everything ran perfectly. Now, I don't know the names of the other caretakers, but I do know the name of one. One of the caretakers, his name was Russell. Now, the reason I know him is because he's the one that came up with kind of a strange idea. Now, they decided to have, or he brought this to them, and they all agreed that they were going to do this death pact. I don't know, maybe they just loved the school really a lot. Maybe back then it was different. But they decided that whoever was the one to die first would be the one that returned and haunted the school as a ghost. I know, it is so weird, but as if by fate, the one who died first was the guy who came up with the idea. So maybe the other caretakers were just like, yeah, whatever, Russell. And maybe he was the weird dude of the bunch. Yeah. If we die, we'll come back and haunt it. But Russell was serious about this because he's the one that died first, and it was his job to focus and clean on the top floor, which is the third floor. And it's just not surprising that is where a lot of the ghostly experiences occur today. So Russell, the Death Pact, he died first, and he did follow his pact. He came back and haunted the place. Now, I'm going to say recent caretaker, but recent would not be recent. It's probably about 8 years ago, as we do on this podcast. So a caretaker named Veronica, she was cleaning the third floor, and then she heard keys jangling in the distance as if off of one of those old key rings that some people still wear on the sides, especially caretakers and janitors and such. Now, she thought it was her coworker Tony, but he showed up soon after, and he had no key rings. She asked him, "Was that you?" And he's like, "No, I don't. My keys are in my pocket. I wasn't making any noise when I was coming. Why would I jangle my keys?" And just as they're discussing this back and forth, they both saw a shadow. It walked out one of the rooms there and walked across the hall into an opposite room. Now, they mentioned seeing the shadow. They also gave some details. So if you have, like, every time I talk about a ghostly or in this case, a UFO experience on the show, I always try and dive into the experience and say, okay, what are the elements that prove it to be true? And then what are the elements that kind of show it to be fake? And here, it would kind of prove it to be true is because when they saw the shadow, they didn't just say, "I saw a shadow," and walked in the room. They actually described how the shadow looked. Now, there are no photos of Russell that I know of. No mentioning of how Russell was built. But if you do believe this to be the ghost of Russell, this could give you that information. So they said that the shadow was tall. They said it was skinny and lanky. So I don't know if you know what I mean. So tall and lanky, maybe hunched over a bit as he walked across the hall into the opposite room. Of course, they went to check the room, and there was nothing in there. So that would give me the detail to believe it. And as well, it was subtle. And the most believable ghost stories, in my mind anyway, are always subtle, never too over the top. In fact, if it's too over the top, then you have a hard time believing it. But seeing a shadow, which me personally, I have seen these, you know that there's detail to it. So from my own personal experience of seeing shadows at the wonderful Hermitage Ruins to these people seeing it, yes, I could describe how the shadows looked as well. Mine, it looked like they were wearing a dress that puffed out at the waist. Both the same. They were like mirror images of each other. And in here they said tall and lanky. So that gives me the ability to believe it. The other side of it is that they aren't the only ones to have experienced Russell over the years. So Dundas District School, as I mentioned, the building is still there if you want to do a drive-by and see it. Right at the base of the escarpment, I'm blanking. I think it's King Street in Dundas. I'm pretty sure that if you go right up to the top, it's still King Street. But you can go have a look at the building. It is lofts now, so you can't go inside. Even when it was a school, not a good idea to go inside. So I'll take another quick pause here, and I'll come back for a story about the famous Canadian comedic actor Dan Aykroyd and his ghostly history. Did you guys see Russell? Maybe not Russell, maybe Slimer. Yeah, we're coming to that point. I was looking forward to this. Honest, I love Dan Aykroyd, and it's not just because he's Canadian. I mean, he's a very well-rounded comedian. If you watch some of his older skits in SNL, I know the back in the day, people give a lot of onus. They say that it was the best back in the 1970s when SNL Saturday Night Live first started. I personally have a hard time watching those, and I know it's because some of it's political. And me today, looking back and watching those old episodes, I'm pretty not even really sure. I'm not a political type person, so I don't even know what the heck they're talking about. But I could see the value in some of the characters that Dan Aykroyd played. Blues Brothers, absolutely wonderful. Him and John Belushi, and I don't know the name of the guy, but he was like a salesman. He would sell toys for kids, but the toys were basically like the most dangerous things. Like there was an action figure that had a knife that shot out the top of it, or it was just one was just a bag of broken glass. So I loved it. I love that kind of stuff. I loved him in Coneheads. I loved him and of course the quintessential one that all paranormal people love, Ghostbusters. So people say, oh, okay, Dan Aykroyd, he was one of the writers for Ghostbusters. That all of it's just kind of like, fake and for fun, and that's how the movie is. It's done more in a fun, cartoonish way, but Aykroyd himself comes from a family of spiritualists. Now, if you don't know what that is, look it up. Like, this is from the 1920s and early 1900s. This was the beginning of the paranormal movement. The spiritualists were the ones who did the seances back in the day. They were the ones that kind of gave fame to the Ouija board, that made it into a board game later on. That was the reason why people kind of got into it. And the Aykroyd family themselves is one of the oldest established spiritualist families in all of Canada. His brother wrote a book. Now, everything I tell you could be covered in the article. As you know, with Strange News, I do not pre-read these articles. But, okay, this looks like it might be more of an interview format with Aykroyd himself. Dan Aykroyd. But let's just get to it. So this is from the Globe and Mail. The date is May 8th, 2020. Look at this, everyone. I have something modern for once. Very excited about that. Okay, so there's a picture of Dan Aykroyd in a snazzy suit looking all cool. He's almost in it's a radio studio. If you want to look it up, the article is titled Dan Aykroyd on His Family History in the Occult. It's by an author named Dave McGinn. That's McGinn. Okay. If you want to talk about ghosts, then who are you going to call? You should probably call Dan Aykroyd. His fascination with the paranormal started in childhood. He channeled that fascination to a particularly well-known movie about ghosts. Yes, it was a comedy, but Aykroyd's interest in the paranormal is no laughing matter. Oh, I see what he did there. He explores his curiosity about ghosts and ghost stories as a narrator of the new television show Hotel Paranormal, airing on T&E. I don't know if everybody gets T&E, but I'm sure you can search it. Maybe it's streaming somewhere. The 10-part documentary series produced by Toronto-based Saloon Media, I've heard of them, Blue Ant Media Company, features stories about people who claim to have encountered ghosts and otherworldly phenomena in hotels. Now this is, as a side note, this is very personal to me. I've stayed in many hotels. I actually told the story of that plantation from the Southern Comfort label that I stayed at with the little kid ghosts. I mean, places like that with so many people going through and so many things happening, especially historic hotels, almost like a focal point of paranormal energy. So if you are a paranormal investigator and you're wondering where do I investigate next, stay in a haunted place. Of course, after the pandemic, it's not really much to do now, but after the pandemic, the haunted hotels, bed and breakfasts, these are the places to definitely go investigate. So this show, Hotel Paranormal, is about hotels, which sounds wonderful, by the way. The Globe and Mail's Dave McGinn spoke to Aykroyd by phone about his family history and the occult, why he wanted to be part of the documentary, and why he hopes it helps turn scientists into believers. It's always been my goal too. So here you go. First question. Is it true your great-grandfather was a spiritualist who held seances? This is Aykroyd. He said he did. There's a book called History of Ghosts. My dad wrote. I screwed that up. So it was Dan Aykroyd's dad, not his brother, that wrote it. Peter Aykroyd. It's about mediumship and his interest in it. He was never the reviewer of all the psychic acts who came through town. He was associated with the Lilydale. He was the reviewer, not never. He was the reviewer of the psychic acts who came through town. He was associated with the Lilydale community in New York. This is like a psychic community, a small town. It's sort of a tourist thing now. Where today you can go and get a reading from a registered psychic. He passed it on to his son and my dad, Peter. Okay. They wanted to know what's going on here. How is levitation possible? How is ectoplasm possible? They wanted to do inquiry. They passed it on to me when I took it and turned it into a ludic exploitation. Oh, okay. Well, he's kind of putting it down. I don't like that. It's a great movie, Dan. Just run with it. And called Ghostbusters. So I got a little confused there. I'm not sure what he was mentioning about levitation and ectoplasm. I assume he just means that his family was into learning more. Next question. Have you had input in the new Ghostbusters that's set to come out next year? Yeah, that's the Afterlife, I think it's called, which it was supposed to come out this year if it wasn't, or 2020 if it wasn't for the stinking pandemic. I gave Jason, as in Reitman, who is, by the way, the son of the man who helped direct the first Ghostbusters, Ivan Reitman, who, by the way, has a connection to my own personal city. He went to McMaster University here. Him, Eugene Levy, I don't know if Dan Aykroyd was part of that back then, too. Or Martin Short. I think John Candy was part of it, but he was never really here. But look up a movie called Cannibal Girls. Catherine O'Hara was part of that too. Cannibal Girls was filmed in Hamilton by the McMaster students, which included Reitman. So I gave Jason my view on how I thought the writing could be maybe pointed up a bit here and there. I gave my advice and counsel. I was mostly in agreement with Ivan and Jason with what should be in the movie. There was really no dispute or anything. It's his story and his take. He's made it his own, and it's really, really good. I can't wait to see it personally. Dan says, I'm excited to take my kids to see it. They should see the first two before the movie with Melissa McCarthy, too. It was very nice parallel universe and very well done. He's being polite. Why did you want to be part of this new show? I love the T&E treatment of these subjects because they are sympathetic to what these people have gone through. That's true. T&E, I always hear any of the ghost shows. I think Creepy Canada was part of the original inclination to that, but you can correct me if I'm wrong. But yeah, T&E's done well with the ghost shows. Continuing, they kind of bust through a little skepticism. Why would these people say they had these experiences that were so hard on them? The evidence is depicted well, and with actual iPhone and camera footage of the events associated with the material is very convincing. Oh, that's cool. So a lot of them just kind of do what they call dramatizations. I can talk about that in the future. I actually can blow the whistle on some shows, which I won't, but I'll tell you the experience another time. But that a lot of them don't use the experience, the actual experience. They just do a dramatization and make it seem like it was actually happening in the moment, which is, very rare that stuff actually happens in the moment. Some investigators can go days without anything and then get the smallest little piece of evidence. So it's rare. So he continues to say, hopefully someone out there, multiple people in the scientific community, will start to make inquiry now on what's going on. He's thinking that this show might get it out there. So they asked Dan Aykroyd, so you're a true believer? And he says that I've been told spectacular ghost stories by people who know that I'm going to take them seriously. I'm not going to laugh at them. That's actually a really interesting point. I'm told many great ghost stories, and I think it's part of the reason why that I'm also a believer in them. And that, a lot of these stories, they get just kind of pushed away, or they're never told to the world because the person is afraid that somebody will laugh at them. So if you do want to hear ghost stories, approach it from a very serious angle, and then watch how people will come to you. The people you didn't expect, and they have wonderful ghost stories. That he's not going to laugh at them. I look at these experiences and I go, boy, you really tell me a vivid story that I can believe. The T&E show is chock full of this stuff. It's fun, entertaining, and scary. And it gives one pause. Not every experience with the paranormal is pleasant, and there are many that are not. So I think that's just marketing right there. Yes, Dan, it's true. If I'd say that the majority of experiences are probably not pleasant. The majority of ghosts usually come from tragic experience. I'm not saying all. I'm just saying the majority. So he asks, is there one story from the show that really stuck with you? And Dan says, the guy in New Mexico in a hotel there, he had to have religious intervention in the end. A demonic entity clung to him. It's so beautifully depicted. Man, he's selling it well. I think I want to watch it now. What continues to interest you in the paranormal? I think who it happens to. Oh, okay, so the people having the experience with them. So people who are vulnerable, who have been brought down by life stresses, who have been weakened, they need conviction in life or they're missing something. A state of psychic compromised immunity, you could call it. That's what I love about the T&E approach to it. They treat the cases very sympathetically because they know these people have been through a warlike trauma in some cases. I don't know. As a side note, I've had many experiences over the years, and I can understand if somebody is extremely scared by it and if they've gotten a shock from that, but I don't know if to say warlike, probably not the best term. Maybe very tense, definitely sticks with you, like you'll never forget. But warlike, I don't know. I have to disagree with that, but again, I think it's just part of the marketing for the show. They continued, what are your hopes for the show? I hope people can come forward and not be laughed at. 100% agree with that. With the sympathy and compassion the producers and the whole tone of the show has, I think people will come forward either public or privately to tell their stories. Wonderful. I think that is going to bust through a lot of skepticism. I think even the hardcore skeptics are going to go, well, that's a pretty convincing story. And I hope that scientific inquiry on the order of what used to happen at some of the universities in the States begins to occur again. That is very true. Paranormal used to be more sought after back in the day, but then there was this turn at one point. This is Daniel talking, by the way. There was this turn at one point that turned away from the paranormal, that kind of made it seem like a complete joke. And that the science, I think it was because of popular media and TV shows and movies, that the science then turned and said, okay, no, it's ridiculous. We're not going to put any time into it. They kind of ignored the entire spiritualist side of life completely, which I think is a huge mistake. But thankfully, this is something that Dan Aykroyd doesn't mention in the article here. Thankfully, there's a turn back towards it with quantum science. And that quantum science, I think, is going to kind of bring that connection back, because that's the one thing that science hasn't really covered yet. It's now being covered in quantum science. So look out for that. Future podcast topic, by the way. Just finally with the article. So a university in the States used to have that, but they don't anymore. We've got to get to academia and science interested in it. The invisible world is out there. It's at work. How does it work? We need scientists to come on board. So it says that the show Hotel Paranormal premiered May 15th, 2020. I'm going to personally look it up. I recommend that you also look it up. It does sound very interesting. Now, we've reached the end of the podcast. Thank you very much for listening. I mentioned I will have a couple quick notes here. The main note is format. I am going to try and keep these to 50 minutes or under. I've already failed you. I'm at 50 minutes and about 10 seconds right now. But I promise for future ones, it will be much more tight. Tight and super sexy. The open talk and ghost or real sections will be combined. And as well, of course, we'll keep the strange news. It's one of my personal favorites. I hope you enjoy it as well. So next week, I will feature an article on the Queen Mary. So if anybody's interested in that kind of stuff, please tune in. Again, thank you for listening, and I hope everybody has a wonderful week.